Someone has to be the practical one, I guess. Not everyone can handle real pressure. My name is Sarah Whitmore, and for 8 years my family had a very specific way of describing me at every holiday gathering. Not unkind exactly, never anything you could point to directly. Just quiet, constant comparison delivered with a smile that made it impossible to object without seeming ungrateful. I grew up the younger of two daughters. My sister Vanessa was everything our mother, Diane, had always wanted: valedictorian, a marketing degree from a well-regarded university, a fast rising career at a firm downtown that handled accounts most people had actually heard of. I had taken a different path, an unremarkable one by my family's standards. I worked quietly, ran a small independent consulting practice from a modest office above a bakery, and never talked much about the details, because every time I did, I watched my mother's eyes glaze over with polite disinterest. This particular Thanksgiving, Vanessa had just been promoted to senior account director, and she wanted everyone to know it. She arrived at our mother's house in a new coat, talking before she had even taken off her shoes about the client wins, the bonus, the corner office she had finally earned. Over dinner, my mother raised her glass for the customary toast, her eyes settling, as they always seemed to, first on Vanessa with obvious pride, before moving to me with something closer to obligation. "I want to toast to Vanessa," Diane said, "for reminding this family what real ambition looks like." She paused, glancing at me the way she always did in these moments, as though she were performing kindness for an audience that expected it. "And to Sarah for finding her own quiet little path, whatever that turns out to be." Vanessa laughed, not unkindly but not gently either. "Someone has to be the practical one, I guess," she said, raising her glass toward me. "Not everyone can handle real pressure." The table laughed along with her, the easy, comfortable laughter of people repeating a joke they had made 100 times before. I smiled. I raised my glass. I said nothing. I had learned over 8 years that my family measured worth in titles and client logos, and that as long as they believed my work amounted to nothing more than a quiet little path, they would never think to ask what that path had actually built. What none of them knew, what I had never once mentioned at a single holiday dinner, was that the marketing firm employing my sister, the one financing her new coat and her corner office and her sense of arrival, had been quietly acquired by a private investment fund I built and controlled entirely on my own 3 years earlier. The truth had started 5 years before that dinner, back when I left my first corporate marketing job, the same industry Vanessa had chosen, and realized I had no interest in climbing someone else's ladder. I had spent 2 years there watching talented people burn out under leadership that valued appearances over actual strategy, and I left with a simple conviction. I wanted to build something of my own, quietly, without needing anyone's permission to prove it mattered. I started small, consulting for local businesses struggling with outdated marketing, the kind of unglamorous work that never made for an impressive dinner table story. But I was good at it, methodical in a way my family never valued because it didn't come with a title attached. Within 2 years, I had saved enough, alongside two silent investment partners I had met through careful, patient networking, to establish a private holding fund, the kind that acquires struggling but promising firms and rebuilds them from the inside quietly, without press releases or public fanfare. 3 years ago, that fund acquired a controlling stake in a mid-sized marketing agency downtown, one of several struggling firms we identified as fundamentally sound but poorly managed. We restructured its leadership quietly over 18 months, brought in stronger account strategy, and within 2 years, it had become one of the strongest performing agencies in the fund's portfolio. I did not know when we acquired it that my own sister worked there. I found out 3 months into the restructuring, reading an internal staff directory during a routine portfolio review, and I remember sitting in my office for a long time afterward, staring at her name on the screen, deciding what, if anything, I should do with that information. I decided to do nothing, not because I wanted to hide anything shameful, but because I understood immediately that revealing it would change the entire shape of my family's dynamic in a way I wasn't ready to navigate. And some part of me, if I'm honest, wanted to know how long they would keep underestimating me without a single reason to stop. So I said nothing for 3 more years, through every holiday toast, every quiet comparison, every well-meaning question about when I might find something more serious to do with my time. I let Vanessa believe her success was entirely her own, because in every meaningful way that mattered to her daily work, it was. I simply owned the roof over her office, quietly, from a distance she never thought to look toward. The fund required, per its governance structure, an annual portfolio review presented directly to majority stakeholders, myself included, held each January with senior leadership from every acquired firm in attendance. This year, for the first time since the acquisition, I decided to attend in person. The review took place in the agency's own conference room, the same building Vanessa had walked into every morning for the past 3 years, wearing the confidence of someone who believed she had built her position from nothing but her own talent. I arrived early, before the senior leadership team gathered, and took a seat at the head of the table beside my fund's managing partner, a calm, direct woman named Patricia who had overseen this portfolio for years. I wore a simple gray blazer, nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention before it needed to. Vanessa walked in 7 minutes later, laughing at something a colleague said mid-conversation before she looked up and saw me sitting at the head of the table. Her laughter stopped mid-breath. "Sarah," she said slowly, confusion spreading across her face, "what are you doing here?" Patricia answered before I could, her tone entirely professional, entirely unaware of the personal weight behind her words. "Sarah is majority stakeholder in the fund that acquired this agency 3 years ago. She's here for the annual portfolio review." The room went very quiet. Vanessa's eyes moved from Patricia to me, searching my face for some sign that this was a mistake, some explanation that would make the words rearrange themselves into something less impossible. "You," she said, "own this company." "I own the controlling interest in the fund that owns it," I said quietly. "I've owned it for 3 years." 3 years, Vanessa repeated, and I watched something complicated move across her face, disbelief first, then something sharper, something closer to humiliation. Every promotion, every review, every single thing I thought I earned on my own, you were sitting on the other side of it this entire time. "Your work was entirely your own," I said. "I've never once influenced a single personnel decision at this agency. I don't even review individual employee files. I found out you worked here after the acquisition was already complete, and I made the decision at that point to say nothing." "Why?" Vanessa asked, her voice rising slightly. "Would you sit through every dinner, every toast, every single joke about my real career and never once say anything?" "Because I didn't think the truth would change how this family saw me," I said. "I thought it would only change what you all wanted from me next." Vanessa sat down slowly, the confidence that had walked into that room 7 minutes earlier now entirely gone. "Does Mom know?" "No," I said, "no one in the family knows until today." "Why tell me now?" Because the review required my presence in person this year, and I decided I was done letting a lie of omission protect either of us from an honest conversation, I said. I built this fund quietly, the same way I've built everything, because I never needed anyone's approval to know it mattered. But I think some part of me also wanted proof, eventually, that I could show up in this room without announcement and still be exactly who I've always been. Patricia, sensing the personal weight of the moment, quietly excused herself to give us privacy, closing the door behind her. Vanessa was quiet for a long time, staring at the table between us. "Every joke I made at Thanksgiving," she finally said. "Every comment about you finding your quiet little path, I meant it as harmless. I didn't realize how it actually sounded until right now." "It sounded exactly the way our family has always talked about me," I said without anger, because there wasn't any left in me by that point, only tiredness. "You never once asked what my work actually involved. You assumed because it didn't come with a title you recognized that it wasn't real." "That's not fair," Vanessa said, though her voice had lost its usual sharpness. "It's exactly fair," I said. "I'm not upset that you built a career you're proud of. I'm only asking you to understand that I built one too, quietly, the way I've always done things, and it deserved the same respect yours received without question." Vanessa nodded slowly, something shifting behind her eyes. "What happens now to my position here?" "Nothing changes," I said. "You earned every part of your role here. I have no interest in disrupting that. I only needed you to understand where the ground beneath it actually came from." She was quiet for a long moment. "I owe you an apology I don't know how to give," she finally said. "You don't have to give it today," I said. "But you do have to decide whether you can see me clearly now, the way you never bothered to before, or whether you'll keep looking for a version of me that was never real." Things did not change overnight, and I don't think Vanessa and I will ever have the effortless closeness some sisters share. But something shifted permanently in that conference room, quietly, the way most real change tends to happen. She stopped making the joke about my quiet little path. It took her months to fully unlearn the habit, months of catching herself mid-sentence at family dinners, asking instead about my actual work, my reasoning, a curiosity she had never once shown before that January. My mother found out eventually, the way these things always surface in families, in a conversation Vanessa initiated on her own months later without my asking her to. Diane called me that evening, her voice smaller than I had ever heard it. "I spent 8 years telling you to find something more serious to do with your life," she said. "You'd already built more than either of us understood." "You didn't know," I said. "I never gave you a reason to ask differently." "I should have asked anyway," she said. "That was always my responsibility, not yours." I never told this story to prove anything to my family. I'm telling it now because I think there are people listening who understand exactly what it feels like to be quietly diminished by the people who are supposed to know you best, who have spent years being measured against a version of success that was never actually the only one that counted. You don't need anyone's permission to know exactly what you've built, even when you choose, for your own reasons, not to prove it out loud. If this story meant something to you, let me know in the comments, and subscribe for more stories about the quiet strength it takes to be underestimated, and the even quieter satisfaction of finally being understood.